he did not subscribe to the liberation theology, the amount of partiality, ethnic partiality that was preached and advocated and propagated at that MLK 50 event. Now, Martin Luther King was many things, but I would not classify him as a black liberation theologian, but black liberation theology is really what you heard, excuse me, being propagated at the MLK 50 event. And I think that's what took so many people aback. Many people were shocked because they expected to hear the gospel preached. They expected to hear the gospel talked about, but that's not what was talked about. This was the most, it was really borderline cultural Marxism is what it was. And again, that was my first exposure to what that sounded like from well-respected pastors and evangelical leaders within the church spewing off the theology of James Cone, the cultural Marxist theology of Antonio Gramsci, and Karl Marx and people of that nature. So, but I think what led to that is the same problem that we're having today. There's two things that I see as primarily problematic within the evangelical church. Number one is the level of biblical illiteracy in the church. People are not students of the Bible. They scantily read it. They rely on their devotionals to serve as their theological underpinning. So, but along with biblical illiteracy, you have evangelical pragmatism, wherein the church has succumbed to pragmatic ways and approaches and tools to try to draw to the church an unbelieving, ungodly culture. And one example of that is the MLK 50 event. Those speakers were trying to relate to a culture which, according to Scripture, number one, shouldn't want anything to do with the church, and number two, doesn't want anything to do with the church. So, but the way that event just kind of ended up manifesting itself and playing out over those 3 or 4 days was really shocking. But we did do an episode on that where we addressed a lot of that through what Scripture says and tried to rectify and correct a lot of that error that was being preached through that event.
Darrell Harrison joining us today here in the Meeting House on Faith Radio from the Just Thinking for Myself podcast. Also Dean of Social Media at Grace to You, the Bible teaching ministry of John MacArthur. Heard weekday afternoons at 1:30 on Faith Radio. Well, Darrell, I'm looking at the clock on the wall here, so to speak. We are running we're running close to the allotted time, and there like you said, there is so much here. And we hear terms like CRT, woke, and I agree with you. When I was following the reporting on that conference, I was like, these are some ideas that I have not heard, but this is not consistent with my understanding, biblical understanding. Obviously, you and Dr. MacArthur and a number of others who were concerned about this issued that the statement on social gospel,
right,
social justice and the gospel. I also noticed the Dallas statement,
right,
I think it was.
Yeah.
And that wasn't that long after that. So what did you want to do with that statement, just very briefly?
Yeah, I think the goal for that statement was just to establish a biblical position, an orthodox biblical position around some of these sociocultural issues that were beginning to come against the church. Issues such as race, gender, intersectionality, the whole LGBTQ agenda was really not to make enemies of anyone, not to cause an undue disruption within the evangelical body, but it was just to establish biblical orthodox positions on those issues. That was the fundamental goal of the statement.
And Dr. MacArthur
preached
a number of sermons on that topic.
Yes, he did. And matter of fact, Dr. MacArthur has said he's said that social justice. And he's been in the ministry for over 50 years.
Yeah.
He has said that the social justice movement is the most dangerous thing to come against the church in the 50 plus years that he's been in ministry.